Hi, it's Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome to another episode of Career Coach Office Hours. Woohoo! I like to spend time, or I actually do spend time, Tuesdays at 9:15 Eastern and Fridays at 9 a.m. Eastern, answering questions about job search, hiring more effectively, management, leadership, as well as dealing with scenarios, shall we say, workplace related issues. And if you're watching me on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, and I'm curious where you are, who you are, where you're from, just put it into chat so I know who's here. Hi, T, how are you? And we'll be starting in a minute. But the long and the short of it is, I started this show because I realized people need help. And in asking for help, well, most people don't really ask for help from people who really can help them. They may ask a friend, a former manager, a family member sometimes for advice, but often these are individuals who know as little as they do, and sometimes a little bit more, but not enough to be helpful. So, what I like to do is to spend time uh, on these two occasions per week answering questions from people. I receive them by email in advance of the show. So I've got a number of them here to work with. But if you're watching me on one of the platforms and you have a question, put it into chat and I'd be happy to respond to it. Patricia, welcome. And Greenbelt, LSS Greenbelt, fabulous. And you're in Raleigh. Woohoo! I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, by the way. And welcome. Welcome on. Patricia, if you or anyone else has a question, feel free to put it into chat, okay? So let me just start with my first question. Bear with me while I get to it. Why would an interviewer mention a second interview and then reject you? Obnoxious? Yeah. Um, but often there are factors outside of their control that come into play. Sometimes a rec is pulled. Sometimes they're afraid to tell you in the room that you're going to get turned down. Sometimes, they just meet someone who they think is stronger and they fall head over heels for that person. It's like a romance. So they are romanced by this other person, fall in love, and decide that even though they've mentioned that second interview to someone, they're ready to move forward. As I said, sometimes a rec is pulled. Sometimes they're told something about the individual from someone who may know you. That's a really small possibility, but it sometimes happens. And thus understand, we're all human beings. We make mistakes. We don't always do things in the best way possible. They shouldn't have mentioned the second interview if they didn't plan on following through with it. But given that they've done it and they're pulling back, they've decided that it's not going to go any further. It's like a date where you had a good first impression and then thought about it. Said, I don't think so. Maybe there's a warning sign or two here, or maybe they're being pushed into doing something different by their boss. A lot of possibilities for this. I can't know which one it is, but the outcome is still the same. And it's not a good look for that firm. What are the key things an interviewer looks for in an interviewee? I love that language. Interviewee. Competence, self-confidence, character, chemistry, maybe a little bit of charisma, because charismatic people always do better than non-charismatics. Care, that you care about what you do and you wear it on your sleeve, because they interpret passion in a positive way. All of which adds up to they trust you. And they want to trust the person that they hire, because for many of you, you're going to be an absolute stranger to your future boss. Thus, they're going to want to feel something, not just simply know something. After all, there are a lot of very competent people who do what you do, right? So why should they choose you? You've got to give them that feeling in the interview that you're credible, believable, and there's no knockout factors for you. So that's not necessarily objective knowledge. That's an emotional response to what you say because they want to make a decision where they feel like they can trust the person that they're bringing on board and they're going to be low maintenance. Okay. How do I catch a lie in an interview? You probably can't. And I say this from both the employer and employee perspective because there's ample data to suggest that neither side really is good at catching the other. Why do I say that? Well, most job hunters, when they join an organization, well, once they're on board and they're a month or two in, they feel like they made a mistake. There's always that moment where they go, oh my God, I don't think I made the right choice. And then they kind of settle in and learn to tolerate. Conversely, on the employer side, many employers, well, the hiring manager statistically within 18 months for almost 2/3 of their staff have buyer's remorse. And again, that's a statistic I read a year or two ago. Thus, neither side is good in evaluating the other because both sides are posturing to one another about whether or not this is a great opportunity and whether they're qualified. So it's hard to really do it unless you know more about the organization that the job hunter is coming from and the employer is delivering for. Why do I say that? Job hunters, you know, every bit of information you find out is really secondhand information from people who may have worked there a while ago and left. They left because something wasn't satisfactory about them. Employers are checking references that are provided to them by the employee. So, how are you going to get factually accurate information from one another if this is a setup? Plus, everyone's on good behavior. As a job hunter, no one ever tells you what happened to the last 3 or 4 people who sat at the same desk you're going to be sitting at, why it was that they left. And conversely, for the employer, how many bad references have you ever found out from people, right? And the job hunter is putting on a good show for you because they want to be hired. So it's hard to really do it. So you basically have to trust your gut along the way. And if you're talking to members of a team as part of the interview, sometimes they'll give you little signals that can cue you into some of the problems there. But the simplest question that you can ask as a job hunter is, okay, what's wrong with this place? Everything seems wonderful and lovely. But like what happened to the last 3 people who sat at the desk I'm going to be sitting at? Why did they leave? They left for a better opportunity. Right. What made it a better opportunity? How long were they here? What did they do well? What didn't they do well? If they give you a lot of venom about what they didn't do well, that gives you a sense of what those people are like and what their attitudes and critical nature is like. Again, it's hard to really know if you're stepping into something worthwhile. So catching them in a lie is really hard. What do you do when you realize you hired someone, there's a specific title here, and I can skip over that, who has a bad memory and below average performance? It's been only 2 months and they have already forgotten to attend meetings and don't respond to all emails. Should we just fire them? No. You hired them for a reason. I think a frank conversation with them is in order. And the conversation could be very simple. You can say something along the lines of, there's a couple of places that I'm disappointed about. And I want to see whether you have issues with me with the organization, because maybe your behavior is indicative of you having a problem and not feeling comfortable coming to me. So the idea is you open up the conversation with them first to talk with them about their disappointment, your disappointment, and see if you can come to some sort of mediation about this kind of stuff. The result will wind up being the frank and honest exchange allows you to come to agreements about what they need to do next and what you need to do next. And if they don't follow up on it, what you're able to do is to turn around and go, I've got to put you on a PIP, a performance improvement plan, because I'm not seeing the results that we agreed to. I've done my part, but I'm not seeing you're doing your part. So I want to see these results in the next 30 days, or you're going to be gone. And get your management's approval to give that sort of blunt message. So, no, I wouldn't let them go now. As a leader, your job is to lead, and it's not thinking that people are disposable. Maybe the mistake is on your side and you've lost them. Maybe you misrepresented the job to them and you're losing them. You're losing them emotionally, and it's a question. The reason they're not showing up for meetings is they're finding it hard to look you square in the eye, having been lied to. I don't know what your circumstances are. Sometimes it can be as simple as these. Sometimes there are many possibilities for why it happens. Question from chat. Thank you, Patricia. How do you overcome, is it cliques you meant to say, in a working environment? I don't know if it existed beforehand or has formed since you've been there. So that's a factor in the answer. So I'll start by saying teasing is always a good way. With a big smile on your face. And that could be done in meetings. It could be done by phone. And it's about breaking down the barriers and saying, does someone have an issue with me? I just get the idea that I'm on the outside looking in. So, can I get in with the sorority here or the fraternity or whatever it is and become one of the girls, one of the guys? And what do I have to do to rush the sorority? Sorry, someone put up another chat message, and I'll simply say, you got to play with them a little bit instead of sulk. I know in situations where I joined organizations, and I worked in sales as a recruiter, and these people are brutal. And eventually they grew to like me. And that takes some time. So patience, teasing, kidding, delivery, because you got to do a good job along the way. My son told me of a situation. He's working front of the house at a restaurant in New Jersey. And he said right before dinner service on Sunday, kitchen staff walked out. And, suddenly there's chef and no one else in the kitchen. And they've got a full dining room coming of a couple hundred people and 2 private parties. And the result, he said, we got through it. And he told me what he did in the kitchen because he was culinary trained and worked with chef to deliver meals. He said, and I think it's true, when there's a hard experience, people come together. It's a bonding time. So I would say, look for situations where you can bond. Sam, thank you for your question. How do you get past the ageism barrier in job search? I'm so glad you've raised this because I forgot to talk about something at the beginning here. And I'm going to first answer your question, then I'm going to go to something I forgot to tackle right away. The answer is, how do you present yourself? Do you present yourself for all your experience, or do you present yourself for mental agility, acuity, and flexibility? So often, older professionals kind of waltz into interviews and they recite a bunch of facts They look across the table at someone who's 20 years their junior, and they say to themselves, "Oh, my daughter is sitting there. Oh, my son is sitting there." And they give up right away because the fact of the matter is they project onto this person pure rejection. So there are cues along the way that a hiring manager might give that will suggest that they're turned off because of age. And you got to listen to those cues and basically deal with them right then and there. Not by saying, "Are you being biased about my age?" No. But it's, "I get the idea you have a concern about," and you put it on the table for them. And then you answer what you believe the concern is. Sometimes they'll say, "No, no, I'm not concerned about that, but you just mentioned such and such. So I just want to address that." And usually the question is, number one, the person doesn't project energy. And thus the individual doesn't look like they fit in. Number two is they don't dress particularly well. They dress 15 years behind the times, and it's a younger staff, and the manager worries, blah, 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 blah. It's a bunch of nonsense, but it all starts off with understanding what firms look for. And I'm going to go back to my previous answer. They ultimately want to trust the person that they hire to can deliver. So ageism takes a lot of forms. And this is where I was going to start off this show and to say, if you think ageism is only an issue related to people our age, and I'm not exactly 24 anymore, 22-year-olds, 24-year-olds, younger professionals experience even more than older ones. Don't believe me? American Psychological Association collected data. Younger professionals deal with ageism far more than older professionals. Younger professionals are more likely to get hired and having been lied to about opportunities, but older professionals don't get hired. That's the concern. The reason you don't get hired is you don't make a connection with the person who's interviewing you. So that has to be your focus, not just simply reciting facts, but connecting with the person. And if they say something that smacks of concern about whether you fit in, whether you will usurp them because they're a 35-year-old manager and you're in my case, 70-year-old interviewing for a job, you got to put it on the table and say, "Look, I've been in your seat. I understand what it's like, the emotional pressures. I don't want your job. I'm willing to be a resource for you, and I'm willing to do this staff level job because this is your time, not mine. I want to support you being successful, blah, 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 blah." And that's your best way to do it, is to talk with them honestly, which leads to the question, to the subject I wanted to deal with earlier. And that is, as older professionals, one of your jobs is to coach and mentor younger professionals. You're not going to be in the workforce much longer. Whether it's through retirement or death, you've got a shelf life to you. But what you know and who you are has a much longer shelf life to it. And the more you open up to people, the more you give of yourself, not by telling people what to do, but by sharing stories and say, "Hey, look, it's your decision, not mine. This is what happened to me some years ago. Circumstances may be different right now, but offer advice if asked for it. Offer to give advice when asked for it. And develop the relationship with younger professionals that they crave. And they do crave it. One of the things that annoys younger professionals is that folks like us, and I'm putting myself in the older realm, are in the way of their success, so they think. But if you can support them in being successful, you will help them a lot. And you are more likely to be valued institutionally and less likely to get pushed out the door. Again, work with the younger pros to help them learn and grow so that you're not pushed out, that you have a value beyond simply delivering on the job, that you can do things beyond that to coach and mentor, so that in this way, well, they like you and they want to keep you around. And that becomes another way you get through the cliques in organizations. Because often people are generationally siloed. Younger workers stay with younger workers, older workers stay with older workers. The twain doesn't meet. Be the bridge, be the conduit for information being passed between older and younger and younger and older. What should I do if I sent a resume with the wrong date on one of the positions? I just got back from an interview, and the interviewers asked for references. You message them back and you say to them this: I just reviewed dates. I made a mistake. I just want you to know this before anything happens or you think I did this intentionally. It's a long time ago. I put the wrong dates in, or I had a brain cramp and put the wrong date in, and I want to correct it. It wasn't May, it was February. I joined that organization, or conversely. Or I left in February, it wasn't May. Well, what did you do between February and May? And then you tell them. And if there's a gap, there's a gap. But your job is to be forthcoming, because unfortunately, if they find out post-employment that you lied on an application, because that's always the critical thing, the application, about where you worked and when you worked there, it's grounds for termination. So you got to bring this to the table so that, and you can do it by email or phone, makes no difference. Or you can send them a text that that's the way you've been communicating with them. But don't let it sit, because you'll wind up getting hurt. Is it easier for an employer to choose the best candidate for a job when a team of interviewers screens them, or when a one-on-one interview is done, and why? So I can't tell whether or not you're asking about staff interviews here, or whether you're asking whether the manager is going to do a one-on-one. So I'm going to deal with this on the basis of team interviews versus individual staff members doing one-on-one interviews. So none of them work if they are not told what it is you're really looking for and how you'd like them to evaluate for it. Usually what happens is a lot of interviews are done on the basis of a whim. It feels like this is a good question I should ask. They ask the question, bleh. And the result winds up being that, there's no standard questions asked, no way of objectively comparing one person to another, at least for basic information. So unless you address the what I want you to screen for questions, maybe review what it is you want them to ask, neither format makes a difference, because ultimately the staff is going to evaluate on the basis of whim. I think they're a little too light. Well, how did you come to that decision? Well, I asked them about this obscure fact in the textbook and they didn't know the answer, but this person did. Well, they're 15 years younger. They just read the textbook. That happens way too often. So standardized questioning is the baseline to confirm that someone has a background that's appropriate for the role, is the launch point to everything. Then from there, what you want to do is have them take it a level deeper, whether it's one-on-one or group, makes no difference. But again, you want the interviewers to not just evaluate for competence, but you want them to trust that this is a person that they're willing to go into the bunker with if times got tough, that they would trust them to do a great job if suddenly there was a crisis that would take place. What are some reasons that a potential hiring manager would keep delaying their hiring decision? Well, the basic one is they're not ready to make a decision because they haven't fully bought into you. I remember a friend of mine wrote a relationship book, and he's a guy talking to women, and the women were wondering why it is they don't hear back. They've been going out for a while, and I'm not hearing back from him. And his answer was, he's just not that into you. Well, that's part of it here too. You haven't made them fully fall in love, and thus they're not willing to drop down on one knee and propose marriage. So you've got to understand, again, your job is to connect with people so that they trust you. And thus they're delaying the decision because they don't fully trust that you're the solution to their problem. They don't like you personally, or they've gotten negative feedback that they're not ready to resolve yet. There may be budgetary concerns. They may be busy. That's the simplest one. They may be too busy to make a choice, and they're going to get to it when they get to it. And there are a couple of other things, but ultimately it comes down to they're delaying because they're not ready. Just like in marriage, when you're not ready, there's no marriage proposal, right? When you're ready, there is one. So they're just not ready to get married to you. How do you know you're on the right path to your purpose in life? Well, the answer starts off with number one is if you're answering the question, you're not doing purposeful work. You're not on the right path. So let's just concede that point. If you don't know, you're not on that path. Because when you know, that's you know when you're on that path. So there are things that you can be doing that will help you. Um, I just did an interview and released it earlier today with Ken Coleman, and he talks about from paycheck to purpose. That's the title of his new book. And you can watch the interview on my YouTube channel, JobSearchTV.com. I've released it into LinkedIn. It's a 30 some odd minute interview, so it's not uploaded. But if you come to my profile page on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/IN/the big game hunter, look at my activity. I'm sure you'll find it there as something that I've shared a link to on YouTube. But I've got a lot of content on YouTube and at my website, thebiggamehunter.us, that can help you identify some of the things that would feel purposeful to you. Then you may have to get qualified for it so that in this way, you can't just decide, oh, I would like to be a poet, and you've never written a line of poetry before. Perhaps there are things you need to learn about being a poet before you fully commit yourself to it. So again, once you ask the question, you're telling me you don't know. And you may know, but are afraid to take action. Start taking action. Start looking at things. Start investigating. Research. Like I said, at thebiggamehunter.us, there's stuff there about changing careers. On LinkedIn, you can get my interview with Ken Coleman at on my profile page, which is linkedin.com/IN/the big game hunter. Then scroll down to activity. You'll be able to locate it there so that in this way you can start exploring some things. I've been looking for a better job for some time now, and something seems to fall short at the interview. I have no problem getting interviews, and I receive compliments on my resume all the time, but I'm not getting hired. What am I doing wrong is the implied question, and the answer may start off with, well, you don't interview as well as you hope you do. And thus, start off with learning how to interview better. I have a course called the Ultimate Job Interview Framework. You can go to the link for it at thebiggameHunter.us/interviews and order the course. Udemy has it very inexpensively priced there. Um, and I would order that course and learn how to interview better. But ultimately, you're not inspiring confidence that you're the solution to a problem that they have. You need to get better. And I know my course will help you a lot in getting better, but that's going to require work on your part in order to get to that point. So you've got to practice how to interview well and not just walking into the interview and winging it. Can an employer fire you for a background check after you pass the probationary period? Yeah, because there's something wrong that they found out. And maybe you lied about your dates. Maybe there's something else they found out, an arrest, a conviction, prison time that you didn't reveal. Yes, they can fire you, especially in at-will states, so that, yes, they can do that. Lon, welcome. What process do you recommend to dial your resume into a particular job or job description? Thank you. I love that question. And this is really very easy to me. So number one, what you do, excuse me, my fingers are a little stiff here. The first thing you do is job description, resume, compare. Do you have the right background for this job for real, or is this aspirational? So I'm going to assume you have the right background. Look at how the job is described. What terms do they use to reflect skills, responsibilities? Use their language and tweak your resume to use their language. In your cover letter, and I want to make sure when you hear cover letter, you don't think about a separate document. In your cover letter, you might just simply write, I'm forwarding my resume to you for the position I saw advertised or based upon the recommendation that Jeff gave me for the role. Let me walk through my background and show you how I match up from what I understand. Now, if you have the job description, it's always easier. Flush left, you put the skill that they're looking for and the functionality sought. Flush right, how long and how recently you performed that function or use that skill. This way, they can see at a glance, and make it the body of your email with the resume attached so they can see at a glance how you fit. If this is uploading it to an ATS, and by the way, try to avoid doing that and networking to someone who can introduce you to the hiring manager. But if you can't pull it off, make it page one of your resume, because what that does is make the cover letter page one and the resume page two. Page one of the resume has all the terms in it that they're looking for in the job, right? The earlier you place these terms in your resume, the more the applicant tracking system believes that you have the background. After all, if it's on page 4, the system goes, old. So it becomes an issue for them. So remember, stuff the resume with their language. I'm not talking about repeating it stupidly, but use it well so that they get that you fit the job, and make sure it's loaded in earlier in the resume. Sam says, I understand that because you're an employee at will, you can be fired at any time for no reason. Well, you can't be fired for discriminatory reasons. That is an obvious exception. If you can prove bias, if you can prove harassment, and other things like that, they can fire. They can't legally fire you when you have a reason to take legal action. There are other factors that come into play. I always say, consult with an attorney who knows something in this area, so that in this way, I'm not an attorney. I just worked in search for what felt like 100 years. So at will translates into they can do it whenever they like. There are other provisions. So If it's a mass layoff, there are laws in effect about how an organization conducts a mass layoff. So they have to provide notice to the federal government and the employees. I want to say 60 days in advance, but again, I don't remember what it is. You can probably do a search about mass layoffs and notice period. They have to notify the federal government as well. There's other provisions in there that I don't know anymore. So Sam, you've got some work to do around that, and it's all locatable on the web. Two more questions. How do you deal with it if you keep getting fired or let go due to office politics? Well, I think you're using office politics as an excuse, because I can accept this one time, but I can't accept it as keep getting fired as though it's on multiple occasions. There's something that you're doing that's causing you to get rejected. Maybe you don't do work as well as you think you do. Maybe you're behaviorally obnoxious to the other people there. But when I hear keep getting fired, there's something more than just simply office politics. Office politics to me is two people have a disagreement about how something should be done, and they choose the other person's. Not that people get fired because of office politics. Time to look in the mirror, folk. Male, female, I don't know if it's guy, gal, but time to look in the mirror for your part of this and stop pointing a finger at others. I answered this one. Can an employer fire you for a background check after you pass the probationary period? I thought I answered this earlier, and the answer is yes, they can fire you. And I'm not going to repeat my yes, I did answer it. 2 questions before. My apologies for the repetition. I'll simply say, if you have a question for me, email me before Friday at thebiggamehunter@gmail.com. In the subject line, put the phrase office hours. This way I know what it's about, and I have a way of preparing in advance of the show. Also, visit my website, thebiggamehunter.us. I've got a ton of free information on the blog that will help you with your job search, with hiring better, management, leadership, resolving workplace issues. While you're at the site, I also have courses that are available that you can get that will help you in a variety of ways. There's a drop down to the courses. Follow that. It will help a lot of you with interviewing, answering interview questions, and so much more, as well as starting a new job. There's information there about how to start into a new role effectively. And if this isn't your time to do it, if you're not ready, just put the website address in your phone. Again, that's thebiggamehunter.us and my name, Jeff Altman. This way you can circle back to it at a time when you need it. Lastly, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/the-big-game-hunter. Mention that you saw Career Coach Office Hours, some of my content on YouTube, which is, JobSearchTV.com takes you to my YouTube channel, or you can listen to my podcast, No BS Job Search Advice Radio, #1 in Apple Podcasts for job search, more than 2,200 episodes that will help you with your search. And Saturday, where I normally don't do a show, I think I'm going to bring something out for what is my 11th anniversary. 11 years of podcasting, No BS Job Search Advice Radio. Have a terrific day, and most importantly, be great. Take care.